Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I am Michael Rothschild. I'm the Senior Director of OT Solutions at Tenable, and I am pleased that you've joined us today. I'm also pleased to have some excellent speakers where we're going to have a fireside chat based on increasing your OT visibility and reducing cyber risk. I'd like to introduce today my two speakers, Andy Gesh from SmartTech 24/7, as well as Barak Perlman, who is the VP of OT Security, is also the founder of Indigi, who is from Tenable. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining today. This should be a lively discussion, and I'd like to also encourage our listeners, if you have anything that you'd like to have asked, I will be asking the questions today, so please just put it in the chat, and we'll get to them quickly. So to open up the conversation, so much has changed in OT security over a long period of time. In fact, OT has been around since the late 60s. When we talk about programmable logic controllers, or PLCs as we refer to them, sometimes we refer to them as DCSs. They've been around for just so long. They really make everything work in terms of manufacturing critical infrastructure. So I guess the question, just to open up right now is, why are we concerned about OT security now if it's been around for the better part of 60 years?
Yeah. So I'll be happy to start with that, Michael. I think it's a great question to start with, because I think the concept of cybersecurity wasn't even here before the, let's say, mid-90s or so. And really one of the problems is that OT equipment, PLCs, RTUs, SCADA, DDC, whatever our fellow engineers call their own systems, it grew completely separately on a separate technology track than IT equipment ever since the 80s, 90s. And what we found ourselves then today, 30, 40 years after, we found ourselves with industrial facilities, whether these are power plants, water treatment facilities, automotive manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, all of these areas that have equipment that we're not used to seeing in IT, because it's not Microsoft, SAP, and Oracle, but it's Siemens and Schneider Electric and Honeywell and General Electric, etc. And that equipment has completely different technology that standard IT security equipment cannot monitor and cannot identify. That is the reason for needing some kind of unique visibility into OT. I think the interesting question is, why now? Why not 10 years ago? And the simple answer, it's really a simple answer here, is that a decade ago, we really did have our facilities mostly disconnected from the internet, disconnected from the enterprise network. But I think this day and age, we almost never even find anyone that tells us we have an air gap or we have completely separate network. By the way, those that do say that they have a separate network, usually 90% of them eventually find out that one of the engineers, the support personnel, the integrators left the connectivity behind them. So what we're seeing in the past 4 years is that connectivity driving the need for security. More and more IT security teams understand that that the threat landscape has evolved, as well as the attack surface of their own industries. I think this is why we're here, why I hope people join. So just wanted to give that bit of context as the background of why now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Barak.
I have to accept.
I can 100% echo with you there. There's 2, 3 things to this really. Number one is, of course, disruptive technologies be becoming more and more integrated, as you say. So 20 years ago, it was absolutely normal. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, it was totally normal to go with a piece of paper from your manufacturing to your order management, to your planning team, and go over the numbers. Today, everything is going over systems and is getting integrated with SAP, with the quality control programs, and everybody wants to do it on a push on a button. And it's the same, it's similar to the journey into the cloud. Everybody wants to be in the cloud, but nobody talks about the security proper. And now we finally seeing the problems coming up, boiling up, and people are start understanding there's more to this. I come originally from an electronics side. I learned with Deutsche Telekom, and I was connecting telephones with wires and little motors and engines going up and down and all this. And we bought Siemens, and we always said we don't buy a piece, we buy a kilo of Siemens because of the size of the contract. And we had then the ship control systems. And one thing that I already 25 years ago said, when we had the first box in there and somebody connected with a serial cable on it, and I saw already that they had actually a Ethernet port on it. I said, what's going to happen when you connect this up, and how easy is it to break? And they were laughing at me. They were laughing. In fact, this could never happen. And look at the list of companies that have been breached in telecoms. Everybody was at least once on it, and it is the same. It doesn't matter. It is a different way of critical infrastructure than most of the people when they talk about it. We're talking now with our customers today more about the infrastructure in production, manufacturing, and we see a lot of things happening. And it is a crossover between the two networks that nobody evaluated the risk proper when they did it in 5 years, 10 years ago, and now it's biting us all back.
So I think what we're talking about here is a certain level of convergence, right? This yes. notion of IT OT convergence that's happening a lot more frequently. Do you have a feel for how many people are actively converging at this point? There, in the past, we've always talked about air gapping as being the gold standard in security. It's obviously not as much of a story to tell anymore because people are converging. Do you have any idea as to what the uptake is in terms of people knowingly and purposefully going to that convergence model?
Sure. I think what Andy said is spot on. We've met so many CIOs, Chief Information Officers, that from their perspective, the major goal of next year, whether it's 2017, 18, or 2021, their main goal is to have the engineers stop finishing their shift at the plant, go to the SAP system on the other network and input how much plastic they used in that shift. And getting rid of that obstacle is their main goal, meaning we see more and more of these walls being broken down because of efficiency, because of the need for more efficiency. And that's what Andy mentioned. Everyone always go and make their process more efficient. Only then we think about adding security. And I think that the OT industry, we have this great opportunity that we can do simultaneously. We can design the integration and tailor in security while we do that.
Great. Andy, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, it's really spot on. There is not much to add, really. The only thing that I can give an example, because we talk about different industry, I'm a lucky one. My better half was always in supply chain and planning. So I've seen IT planning. I've seen how iPhones are built, and the technical side and the planning side. And these days she calls herself a drug dealer because she's working for one of the large pharmaceutical industries. And the amount of efficiency-driven decision-making on the high level is becoming a complete different, because now IT and OT become something. So I've seen companies spending billions on replacing a database system because it didn't fit anymore the efficiency standards. And they wanted to integrate everything into one platform, which is big enough. And every time when my girlfriend talked about those projects, I was like, okay, what are you doing for security on that? How do you secure that? Actually, you always tell me, oh, it's so bad because when when a batch goes off in production or even in a trial for a clinical trial, so they're cooking something up in one company, and it takes 3 months to ferment the right bacteria to whatever they do. And I'm like, you have already enough trouble keeping control over that, and you get cross-contamination and this and that. But now you're connecting actually your IT systems to it. How do you make actually sure that somebody is accidentally doing something and it fails over into that network? Not even talking about malicious code, which is even worse, and we've seen that on a regular basis, but just those small things. And how do you put the control elements in place that your engineering team can say, actually, hey, don't do that. That's stupid. We do this. And then comes always a big question mark. Why would we do that? And it's like, because that is real efficiency, preventing the knockout effect, where you got thrown back 3 months in your production, or for 2 days or 3 days, whatever it is. But every batch going off or going wrong is money lost.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point, Andy, to what do end users really need, what they want, etc. And I think this is a great point, because a lot of the kind of pure play IT security companies, antiviruses, for example, they talk about protecting from malware, period, protecting from hackers, ransomware, etc. Whereas when we talk about OT security, specifically Tenable Smart Tech, we define cybersecurity as something much broader.
Yeah.
From our perspective, security is everything that can cause downtime to your facility. We want to prevent or show you everything there. And for many of our customers, honestly, in this safe environment, they're not concerned about malware shutting down or another state shutting down their infrastructure. They're concerned about the system integrator coming into their facility, providing maintenance for 6 hours, and they leave their laptop behind because they forgot their equipment, or they brought their laptop that their kids used to play games on Facebook or whatnot. I think these are most of the cases, and it's almost unimaginable, I think, or at least that's what we thought when we founded Indegy, so I'm not very objective, but we thought it's amazing. The fact that I have a Siemens integrator coming into my environment and I don't have an exact log of everything they changed in every device, in every Siemens device, in every Windows device, on the OT network, and then have all that information flow into your IT security SIEM, Security Operations Center, however your company deems fit to manage security. We should all, rambling on, but we should all strive to have all that information in that centralized location. It's not just security, it's visibility and security like this.
You mentioned one of the best examples, and I can't mention the company or something here, of course, but we had a classic example in a company producing in the food industry, more I can say, and they had a supply chain, so a vendor coming into them, and they had an ESX host standing there to run certain tools of it. And what they would do is they spin up a VM and they do something and then destroy the VM. But what happened really there is they had a Gould image that was last time approved probably 5-6 years ago. And they spin it up. And the first time they spun it up, we didn't know what it was, but we found actually WannaCry on the network.
In the VM?
At that time, because we were monitoring only with the boundary tools, we were not inside. So this is one of our customers that are right now trialing actually Indegy, because they learned it the hard way. So the first time we could only identify which network, but we couldn't tell which machine because it was something that we didn't monitor from the SOC perspective. And we didn't have the Indegy inside, so we didn't see the network, we didn't get the monitoring capability from Indegy or anything. So, and we didn't know where they were connecting to, because some of the IP addresses were not in made no sense to us, because it was, of course, the PLCs and everything. It didn't do any damage on them, luckily. And then we cleaned this up, and then a month later, again, the same happened. But this time the machine was long enough up and running so that we could identify and say, like, by the way, why is on an ESX host in old Windows, I don't know if it was a CE or XP, it was so stone old, no antivirus, of course, full of malicious code because somebody got it. And the worst thing is, I'm telling this story to another customer of mine a couple of days ago. I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's like, those suppliers, can't they just take common sense together a little bit? And it's like, and you won't believe it, but I have people coming in with old Windows laptops because they need the serial port to connect to some old stuff. And they're literally signing blindly off our documents saying that they have everything virus scanned and everything is clean. And I know for a fact it is not, because the machines are so old. They're afraid to maintain them because they will break it, and then they have not. And these are service providers again; they're not necessarily the vendor itself. So they have old technology somewhere in the place that they can't easily replace. And this is really this knock-on effect between new and old coming together. It's really a clash. It's a culture clash, literally. It's like the IT guy comes in and I need all this, and on the other side the engineer on side says like, wait a minute, you can't just install an antivirus here, that will break my CPU and this and that. And they're both 100% right. So we need to bridge this, and I think we need to get a technology in place that actually caters for both. So I think with Tenable and Tenable OT and Indegy, we're on a very good track to break down those boundaries and get those teams talking to each other. Because if I can show changes made on a PLC that shouldn't be made, that makes the engineer happy. He says like, yes, great. Now, when I'm going on the other side and can give the guys in the IT team, the security say like, hey, you know what, we monitor that. Yes, it is maybe not patched because it's not patchable, but we're monitoring for the vulnerabilities now. We can tell you when something happens, and we can tell you where you have, because we see your network, where you put the right boundary controls in,
right,
and where you need to lock down. Then we get safe. But we need to bring everybody together, and that's the biggest problem with OT, I think.
And I think two things you said, I agree with everything. I think two clarifications there is, first of all, it's not the engineer's fault. I completely agree. It's the fault. I don't want to say it's anyone's fault, but it's more of the OEMs. Let's put it this way. The fact that our users come to you and I and say, we don't even know how many PLCs we have in our network. We don't know how many Windows machines, how many servers, HMIs. We don't know, and the industrial vendors are not giving an answer. So it's up to us, the security companies, to give that answer. I also wanted to add one word of context for those who are not aware. So Indegy is the company where we started working with SmartTech, and now Tenable OT. Tenable acquired Indegy some 6-7 months ago. Tenable OT is our main product that addresses the OT environment, same Indegy product, with more integrations into IT, which I think maybe I'll add one word on that. What we've seen in the last 2 years or so is that more and more of our industrial customers come with the request of, or let me rephrase, they are happy with what they see now on the OT side, but they're sorry that they can't have the same system monitoring both networks. And this is something that we saw repeatedly coming up and up, coming again and again. And besides the unified environment, the unified OT IT management, the second key item that keeps coming up is risk management. So if we all started with visibility a few years back, asset management is the most important thing. Understanding what's happening in my network, we're getting more and more requests to elevate the discussion into risk. What should I do with my unpatched devices? Because like you said, Andy, the Windows machine, I can't patch it, I can't put an antivirus, but it is important, or let's say it's the only important thing because it does the manufacturing I need. So how do I translate the security posture into a business decision? And this is something that we're trying to bring now in Tenable OT to that.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think that really doubles.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, go ahead.
I think that really doubles down on a really good point that we need to bring up, which is around cyber exposure, right? It's not IT or OT, it's a problem now. In terms of one of the things that we see both across IT and OT, it's the notion of vulnerabilities. In 2019, there were over 20,000 vulnerabilities. How does a company deal with that? How do they prioritize what's important, what's not important? I'm thinking in the context of if you're an OT manufacturer, nobody's taking down a manufacturing process to start patching vulnerabilities. How do we handle stuff like that in a critical infrastructure environment? Do we handle it? Do we manage perhaps just the exploits? Where do we go in terms of reducing that type of cyber exposure?
So I think what was mentioned, and it's very important, is actually the discussion first about risk versus the action and identifying that. That's the very biggest problem that they have. Because how do I do this decision, make the right decision as a business, if I don't understand what my risk is? That's a very first part. Apart from that, there is malicious code out for OT. Thankfully, that is yet mainly used on targeted attack and not in common attacks. That's the good news for now, because the common attacks are out there and I can buy them on the dark web like nothing. And the script kiddie is probably more interested in trying a ransomware out than trying to bring the system down. It's also more effort. So you don't get the shining hacker hero for bringing a network down that produces something, but for other things. But still, it is out. And the other problem is the cross-contamination between the two networks. So I think a very good part is get the visibility, understand where you are. What do you have in your network? the large customers that we have and work with, they have an understanding of their OT to some extent. They have something planned out, and they have their shutdown cycles of once a year, every 2 years, or every half a year. And there is some understanding of it, how to do this and what they can patch by now, and the conversation with the teams. But the key still is getting the visibility in first and understand where am I, and then trying to bring measurements actually combine the measurements that you have from the inside and the outside. I think is very important, because it doesn't matter if I can't patch. How do I keep it secure? I isolate it. That's the first thing, and that's the only thing I can do. Simple. So it's the only way that it gets. So you have to be the gatekeeper, like back in the Wild West. You're the daddy with a shotgun. Oops, got shot. You have to protect this, but you can't protect if you can't see it. If you can't see what's coming to you or what's coming from the outside, you can't do it. And the cyber bit is the scary bit, because this is the hardest to control part. Because it's a one unknown. When is an adversary attacking me? How does he come in? Is it my supply chain, or is it somebody from the top down? And then we have the insider threat, the thing where something gets changed, and that needs to be controlled. And in the past, that was always the engineering team does it somehow together. Now comes accountability and risk into it, and now we need to discuss that on a different level. How do I monitor that? How do I visualize it? And it becomes an IT question now. Again, and that is a very important part that we need to bring together is, okay, how do I bring a use case in place that covers, on the one hand side, the cyber risk as a cyber attack, but how does it also bring the cyber risk in that we, in many other places with backups and other tools, bring in place to protect against failures, human error, machine failure? How do I back this up? How do I know what happened? And how can I bring that into my business continuity plan? I think that is a very important part from my perspective. Bringing those two things together, merge it, and start not talking about the cyber risk only. Talk about the really information technology risk that you do normally, because we get, as a security company, involved in both sides, also in IT. Not only the cyber risk, but also what happens when a backup fails. What is your business continuity plan? The same discussion needs to happen in OT on this level, that we just scratching out and say, like, okay, there's only one risk. There's hundreds and thousands of different levels of risk. And everything that a movie imagined in the past will happen or has happened already. So that's there. It's just reality. It's as like watch Dr. Robot, that's true. And if you watch the first season proper, you see the climate control attack. That is OT. And that happened before elsewhere. I know that for a fact. So it's reality. Let's bring the conversation together and build a picture together where we get everything visualized, and then go in and make the right decision. What can I isolate? How do I isolate it? What can I patch? And how do I enforce what I want to do? Because you know yourself, hey, no Wi-Fi network allowed in this factory. I was working for a cyber incident response company, and this company that we investigated had a rule that nobody can bring a mobile phone. 3 times guess who they let in blindly with a mobile phone. The cyber incidents response company came in. Hey, by the way, can you just send me quick a little patch up for this and this? And nobody was even questioning if I should be doing it or not. Now, yes, I should be able probably to communicate like this, because I had to go into this area and I had a cyber incidents response team setting up technology and everything, and I had to communicate with them. That was the only way. But nobody questioned it. And that's the other part of it. How do I enforce things, small things to big things? And I need to monitor and identify.
It's funny, and you reminded me that the customers that we do have that are still segregated, that the OT network is presumably separated from IT completely. Those, when they need support, and we tell them, okay, we'll send someone out because you're segregated, pretty much within an hour they say, no, we got a firewall connectivity, we'll just open the connection and you can connect remotely. So I'm completely with you in the opinion that if it's not open, if it's not converged, it means it's converged without design. So you're better off planning how to remote connect, how to provide that information outside and inside, how to provide that flow of information, because if you won't, we have a water utility customer, another one that that really made us work hard to get out to the field, to every pumping station in every desert, etc. And in one of those deployments, a small pumping station, middle of nowhere. And when we went in with the IT team to deploy a product, they found a USB modem. They found a USB modem that one of the engineers bought and installed in the facility because they didn't want to drive out 3 hours every time there's a small error or malfunction in the equipment. So I think we hear these stories all the time. So it's interesting. Andy, so where most of your customers come today and ask for help with OT, is it more at the first level we discussed before, we don't know what we have, help us start? Or is it more, we want the level of OT security to be the same as IT security, help us integrate the two?
I think it's a mixture of both. So most of them want to bring their level of maturity now up, but they don't know what's in the OT. So it's a combination of both, really. So most customers that bring up this discussion have already a certain level of IT cybersecurity maturity built up, and they're realizing, okay, wait a minute, how much IT do I have in there? Or they had the discussion at some stage with the board, who's actually responsible for that now, for that switch? Who's responsible for that firewall? And everybody said, oh no, wait a minute, I'm the engineer, I'm not doing this. And the IT team says, hey, no, I'm not doing this because it's on your side and you don't let me play by my rules. So, and then comes the part when they get over this first hurdle to say like, okay, we may be responsible together, and they broke that, then the next thing is IT goes in, so what do you have in there? And they're like, yeah, we have Rockwell, Siemens, and then the next question is, and how many of that you have? We don't know. Then comes that part where they start, okay, or can you give me a network map? So because I'm the guy that goes in, okay, you want to monitor this, okay, and take all technologies away, whatever you put in place, even if you just put a network monitoring tool in some form in there, I want a network diagram so I understand what I monitor and where to place it. And then comes, of course, the point, yeah, but we don't know how that looks like. And that's exactly the point where it comes to, because OT is really the old-fashioned engineering way of doing things in production lines and so on. I worked for Siemens and we were building mobile phones, and pretty much when something didn't work, we figured out which part was not working. We added something in or took something out or just wired it slightly different up, and it worked again. Mm-hmm. And it was also network technology. But there was no change control like you do in IT. There was nobody. It's like, hey, as long as it's working, don't change it. Never change the running system. Not anymore true. Or it was this, it's down. How do we get it up and running?
Sure.
Because we're losing money. So you do something and you're the hero. If it was right or wrong, nobody cares. It's working. Fantastic. That doesn't work anymore because now it comes to the point where we're talking risk again, where we're talking responsibility, where we're talking actually business continuity plan, and all those things are coming now into the production world from this weird world of corporate enterprise behavior that we have in our offices and everywhere else, where the production sites were still a little bit back in this, and back in the 80s, I would say, to some extent, like the technology they're using. And that's a difference, really. The customer wants to understand, what do I have really? And the funny thing is, as soon as they start understanding, it becomes also, again, a cost discussion, because they identify, actually, hey, we're using technology that's stone old and written off. And actually, those technologies, we can probably replace with something better that on the long run saves us cost. And that's the other side, they're getting automatically out of it. We not only get with those customers, say, hey, we get visibility on what we have, and we can now do the cyber stuff. There's a lot of things coming. Why do we have 2 of those sitting there, or 3 of them, and we just need 1 or 2 of them? Why don't we change this out? Why don't we change the design of how we produce? Because now we understand what is all in there. Before we were guessing what part is doing what. Now we understand who's talking to.
Right.
And this is so. Sorry, I'm getting long answers here. Short answer is, it is both. It is the maturity curve bringing up situation, and they not understanding what's in my network. That's and I think the not what understanding what's on network, that is the reason why they talk to us in the first place, because they know already they want to bring it up. So they trust that they can come to us and give us anything on log sources that we monitor. but then they don't know what they can give to us. And when they don't know what they can give to us as a MSSP, then comes the question, how do we figure this out? And I think the answer we have sitting right in front of me are the people that actually the experts that brought us up to speed in many areas. We learned a lot in the last year in our partnership. Yes, I have industrial background and so on, but there's lots of things that, where I look at the technology, the first time when we had the demo, I'm like, I looked from a cybersecurity perspective first on it, and then halfway through the demo, I'm just in there, like, oh my God, you could do so many cool things with this just from a production and efficiency level. And then what I love when the technology does more than just one thing. And this kept me as a tech person being interested in this area even more, because I'm now protecting, but I can do so much more with it. And it's opportunity.
That's
security. I think in OT, it's the only area in cyber where the OT actually gets an opportunity presented through cybersecurity more than ever.
I would share one of our old slides. Maybe that's the first slide when we discussed that. I can't agree more. It's like for engineers, especially this is my tip for IT security manager, go to the engineers and explain to them that the smart tech tenable way to do security for OT helps the OT, helps them with incident response and asset visibility and configuration management and audit trails and recovery from human errors. So I couldn't agree more. We have an opportunity for security to help engineering. I like that.
So let's talk about, we kind of danced around it a little bit, but we talked a little bit about identifying assets, right? Knowing what's in your network. That's the only way to secure the network, is to know what's there. It's clearly not enough to know that you have an ABB device, a Schneider, a Rockwell, whatever else. How deep do you actually have to identify things in order to secure them?
Great question, Michael. I think if we really take it down from the 10,000 feet that Andy and I have been talking, and at the end of the day, let's answer with a story. Another pharmaceutical manufacturer, we ask them, what's your asset inventory, etc., and they say, we have an asset management, and they send us an Excel sheet. In that Excel sheet, we have about 1,000 IP addresses and the vendor, Siemens, Windows, Schneider, ABB. And this is exactly the opposite of asset management for two key items. One, asset details is not IP, MAC, and vendor. Asset details is when is this PLC running or at fault mode or at error mode? What is the firmware version exactly of this PLC? What are the open ports on this switch? Who is the logged in user to this Windows server? Pretty much my suggestion is to ask your vendor for every bit of information that you can get from each and every asset, and that should be as deep as possible. And this is why OT is challenging, because getting the firmware version of a Siemens or Schneider Electric PLC is more challenging than finding out the Windows version of a laptop. But this is exactly what you need, that level of details. And the second item is that you need it automated, not manually in an Excel sheet that is out of date the next day, but automated, complete asset details. That's kind of our philosophy, and I hope that's what we bring to our customers with the product. And does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think you're pinning it down to one most important thing is take the human error out. Because as soon you have an asset list and it has to be manually filled in, what happens is, it's end of the shift, I have to get the kids home. I do that tomorrow morning, I'm on the way to my workstation. I want to put it in. My boss comes around, hey, come around for coffee. I have to discuss something with you. And by that time, I've forgotten what I wanted to do. And it's never changed. That's the first biggest problem. Automation is so important.
Right.
And the other part is the detail. And that's the important thing. Who's talking to, who's allowed to talk to. Because this is the information that I need at the end for my team to build a use case out to say like, hey, there's something happening that is unusual. That should not happen. That's why I alert you, dear Mr. Customer. If I don't have this information, then it is only based on one simple thing, that is then actually it's trending And unfortunately, trending is a very, very, very bad thing of doing things. Because the problem is you have a trending for 2 months, and those 2 months you produce, let's say, a fish finger. And then after those 2 months, you change a little bit your production line, and now you do fillets. And now one place is maybe talking once a day in a different way to a different measure or whatever. That never happened before. Because I don't know that, I flag that as an alert. Now it becomes a false positive. So you, after a while, say like, oh, every time we change something, I get false positives, this is wrong. Or every time we get false positives during this month, at the end of the month. So you start ignoring the false positives instead of looking into it. If this end of the month, it is maybe not a false positive, it's something true. So we want to prevent this kind of things, but we can't prevent false positives from happening if you don't know what the bloody thing is doing. And that's what is always, it doesn't matter if it's a server, a laptop, or any kind of device. As soon as talking, communicating, the first thing that I do in cybersecurity is the same on an OT network or anywhere else in the world, even in the army, when I was in the army, who is allowed to talk to who? And who's breaking protocol? And how do I know that? Because the asset list tells me actually, this is this machine is in this group, this is in this network, and I know that this particular network is actually isolated and should never talk to anybody outside of the network. As soon as it starts broadcasting anywhere else, I know there's a problem. So detail is actually, yeah, it's in the detail.
Great.
100% agree.
And I know we tried to keep it civilized and not sales pitch throughout the session, but this is exactly what we provide, right? Smart Tech Tenable, that's exactly what we provide. That's what we're here for. So sorry about this.
If you, I can just say one thing about this really quick. I worked for many and Fire and the big ones. And one problem that we always had when I was in SE, when the subject OT came up, it's like everybody, can we do SCADA? Yeah, we have a SCADA firewall. and then hide behind that a little bit, you know? Now I can go confident in and say like, yes, we can. But this is something that I would say where we can really do this with the right technology and that things in place, where I can say like, yes, we're doing actually SCADA and not just cyber on the OT network. We're doing actually OT, and that is we can only do that with partners like Tenable and Tenable OT.
Cool.
Fantastic. So I think this is a really good place to wrap up our discussion in interest of time. Whether you're listening live, whether you're listening on the recorded version, please reach out to Smart Tech 24/7. Please reach out to us at Tenable. A lot more detail here. Obviously, we couldn't get to everything today, but we're happy to answer any follow-up questions. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. Lots of good intel, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Andy.